Hi, my name is Stephanie Murray, and I'm a senior at Central Methodist University pursuing my degree in computer science. And this is my final project presentation. Before I get into the program that I built for my final project, I want to give a little background about myself so that you understand why I chose this particular project to build. So this is my family. We live at Campwood YMCA, which is a summer camp in the middle of the Flint Hills of Kansas, which is, if you've ever had a chance to visit, is just one of the most beautiful places in the country. This is my daughter on the left, swinging on her giant swing here at camp, and then my son on the right, he's fishing at the lake. And then this is a picture of all of us, and I love personally hiking through the prairie. That's one of my most favorite things to do here. So we've been in camping for 20 years, and summer camp is just everything. Our whole world just revolves around summer camp and everything that goes with it. So I wanted to build a program that not only benefited our camp, but just the camping industry in general. And so I decided to build a program that was a summer camp activity organizer. And that may not seem like something that is relevant or that there would be a market, but there are actually quite a few camps that could benefit from this program. So why a summer camp activity organizer? There are actually more than 14,000 day and resident camps in the US alone. It's an $18 billion industry that serves more than 14 million children and adults each year. And the activities for those camps can vary depending on their location or their population, what kind of budget they have, what kind of time frames they have, if they're a day camp or resident camp or week long or 2 week camp or month long camp. It can even vary based on the type of values that they have. If it's a church camp, or like here at Camp Wood, we are YMCA camp, so a lot of our activities revolve around our character values. So the activities that we have here at this camp range from boating to climbing tower, horses, arts and crafts, um, and even stuff that they kind of create each week, like Minecraft camp or Jedi camp or whatever they feel like they want to do for that particular group of kids for that week. Um, we have typically for resident camp about 2,000 kids here at our camp that come through every summer. And it's anywhere from 150 to 180 kids that come through every week. And on Sunday, they check in. And then on Monday morning, all 150 to 180 kids are asked to choose what clubs they want to be a part of in their morning activity time. In the afternoon, they typically do activities as a cabin, but in the morning, they can do activities that they want to do individually, and they would pick from a selection activities that they would do every morning through that week. So that whole selection process is really important to each kid. There's a lot to choose from, and they want to make sure that they are able to be in the clubs that they want to do. They don't want to miss out on certain activities. So it is a very important process to a lot of kids and leaders, but it's also a very time-consuming process. To put all 180 kids through selecting 3 clubs to do from a choice of 15 clubs can be very time consuming. And then those clubs have to be sorted according to how many can actually be in each activity. If there's a max of campers that can be at the tower, we could only have 15 campers at the tower in order to get them through that 45-minute time period. And but like arts and crafts, we could have 30 kids in arts and crafts. And so they are given a selection of like 4 or 5 choices for club one. And they have to select what's their first choice. Like I really want to do boating, but if I can't do boating, then I'll do my second choice, which is archery. And if I can't do archery, then I'll pick my third choice, which may be soccer. And they do that 3 times for each clubs. Once they have all of the kids signed in, which they usually do through paper and pencil, and it can take an hour and a half or more to get all of those kids signed up because they have to make a selection. It's hard for kids to make a selection. Once they get all of that done, all of those papers are turned in and compiled, given to the leaders, and then the leaders have to sort through every paper and make sure that they are sorted into the clubs based on the max amount of campers that can be in each club. That in of itself is also another time-consuming thing, but one that has to get done before the next day when they actually start those clubs. So it can be a really time-consuming and stressful process. So I sat down with the summer camp director here at our camp and the chief operating officer and the CEO, and we discussed the goals of what they wanted this program to do. And some of those goals were to decrease the time it took for campers to sign up for the activities. That was a big one. Create a process that was easier for the leaders to manage, whether it was how to pick the programs that they would be utilizing for the kids to choose from, or sort it, or just somehow make it easier process for the leaders to manage and go through it all. Decrease the time and stress involved in sorting the campers into their activities. Give the leaders the ability to print lists of specific clubs and cabins, and then develop a way to archive the responses each week in order to track the trends. And one of the things that is benefiting us in this particular scenario is that my husband bought through an auction 20 iPads. They're dated iPads, but they'll still do what we need them to do, which basically this program will run on those iPads, and they can pass those iPads around for the kids to sign up for their programs, and then we'll go through the sorting process. So in order to build this program, I chose to use Google Forms and the app script that goes with it, which is basically a JavaScript. And the reason I went with Google, well, there were several reasons. One, it's a growing platform. There are over 1 million companies that utilize its services, with almost a 6% increase in just this last year. And around the world, over 90 million K through 12 students and educators use Google Classroom. My actual part-time job right now, and the full-time job that I have had, is working at the school district, and we use a lot of Google. Everything is Chromebooks and Google Classroom, G Suite. I had never worked with it prior to working at the school district, and once I started working with it, I found that it was a great thing to utilize, and it's easy to use. It's a cloud-based platform that allows you to work from anywhere. So I don't have to have a Windows machine in order to use it. I don't even have to have my computer to use it. So I can sign in with my Google account anywhere from any computer and work on anything that's in my drive, whether it's papers or even programs. It's generally low cost. There's really no cost to it at all unless you get into some of those more specialized G Suite programs, or if you just want more cloud, if you want more data, that can sometimes cost. But it's generally very low cost, which in the nonprofit world is extremely beneficial. You want something that's not going to be very expensive. Here at this camp, they're trying to go more towards the G Suite and towards Google, using Google Docs and spreadsheets and forms and all that kind of stuff. And so I wanted to build something that was going to align with that. It's really easy to manipulate and have every program work together. Like in this scenario, I have docs working with spreadsheets, working with forms, and it just all kind of intertwines. And so it's really easy to manipulate. And then it also uses JavaScript, which the majority of all languages that are used are JavaScript. So once again, it's just kind of this universal, can work in a lot of different areas. I had built a program similar to this in the school system, and so I kind of already had a working background of it. And I had just really started to enjoy working on the Google platform. And so I wanted to continue to do that and build onto this program. And, there are some things that it doesn't provide, obviously, but you find ways to work around it, and it's easy to share and have lots of people utilize. So for this first go around of building this program, I wanted to use the Google platform. Maybe one day when all the camping industry is really wanting me to build this program for everybody, I might go a different route. But for this particular scenario, I felt like the Google app script was the best way to go. Okay, so without further ado, let's jump into the program. And I'm going to first show you from the perspective of the user, from the leaders being able to populate the form to the campers being able to fill out the form, and how they're able to grab the documentation to print off and things like that. And then we'll get into the code. Okay, so the first thing I want to show you is the start of the form. This is where the form is built. Aesthetically is where you can pick themes, pictures, things like that. That's basically from the perspective of the people that are utilizing it, like the camp leaders and things like that. The picture and the color is pretty much all that they can manipulate. If they go in and change like adding questions or things like that, it messes with the code and then changes the program. So really all they can do is maybe update the picture if they wanted to. But this pretty much needs to stay as is. Google doesn't have currently a way to lock their form. I think you can a little bit through quizzes if you do their Google quizzes, but not through the forms. So this is the start of the form. Here's the preview of what it would actually look like going out to the kids. So it's already pulled up on an iPad, and they can go in and start answering the questions. This is where it starts. So let's say I am the summer camp director, and I am choosing the programs for the week. I know I have 150 kids this week, and I know that I need to use these cabins, and I need to use I want to do these activities. Okay. Let's say I need to add more cabins. You can add more cabins, and that won't mess up the code. And I can definitely change what's here. So just for sake of example, let's change this one to Sunnyside, and this one to Sunflower, just random names. And then let's change the clubs for the week. I really want to make sure the kids have an opportunity to do kayaking. So put that in one club, and then we're going to add skateboarding, and we're also going to add pottery. So these can be changed however they want to change them. So essentially they would go in and update this part of the form prior to the kids signing up on Monday. They click this button to update the form. It runs the script, and then we go over back to our form, and look at there. It's all changed the way it needs to be. There's kayaking. There is skateboarding. Those are the things that we changed. Okay. So as the summer camp director, I go in, I change all that, get it updated, and the form is ready to go. And then we are going to have all the kids fill out the forms. So let's say it's Jimmy's turn and he's going to fill out the form, and he is in elephant cabin. And just for the sake of time, we're going to do this fast. So let's say he really wants kayaking, but if he can't have kayaking, he wants the obstacle course. And if he can't have the obstacle course, he wants fishing. And that's all for club 1. For club 2, he really wants to do Lego, but if he can't do Lego, then he will do skateboarding. And if he can't do skateboarding, then he wants arts and crafts. And next, and for the final club, because our camp does 3 clubs in the morning that they rotate their way through. He wants to do the shooting range, and if he can't do the shooting range, then he'll do the tower, and if he can't do the tower, he'll do creaking. And Jimmy is really happy with his responses, and he'll submit it, and then he'll pass the iPad on to the next kid, and they can fill that out. Okay, so once all the forms are filled out, then they're going to turn in all their iPads, and then the summer camp director can go into the responses, and they can see all the responses that were made. So essentially, there would be a lot more responses here, but this is what they could look at. They really don't have to do anything with this. The important part for them is this menu item that I created, and this is where they can print the list. Now, I don't think Google has a print server option, so really all that's happening is once the clubs are sorted, they get moved over to docs that they can then pull up. And that's why I have these already pulled up here so we can quickly get to them. And once again, all of this would be shared in like one big file that they could utilize. So it would be easy to find all of this stuff. So I'm going to go here and I want to print Club 1 and Club 2, and this could have all been done in one button, but I decided to split it up because I know there's times when they lose a paper or something like that, and they really only want to print one page. They don't want to print everything. So I wanted to give them the option of having those different buttons there. And then I also have a cabins button, so that way they can print out a sheet for every cabin that has a list of all the campers in their cabin and then the clubs that they signed up for the morning. So, you know, we always want to know where our kids are. So you can print the cabin button. And then now we can look at these sheets and it will have the list of all of the clubs and who's in it. So Jimmy is from the elephant cabin, and for club 1, he is in kayaking. And Jimmy for club 2 is in Lego. The reason that I am also in Lego is because I did one prior, but I had signed up for something different in club 1 that's not there anymore. So that's why I'm not in club 1. In club 3, then he signed up for the shooting range. So basically they would be able to hand out these papers, and the person in charge of pottery would have a list of every camper that's supposed to be in club 3 pottery, and they can make sure that their campers are there. And if they're not there, then they know, oh, this is Jimmy and he is from elephant cabin and he's not here, so I need to contact the leader from elephant cabin and figure out why Jimmy is not in my program area. So they can print all these off and hand these out to the leaders of the clubs. And then here's also the cabin. And I put page breaks in these because they want to be able to hand these out a page per cabin. So there's a page break in each one. That's why there's so much paper here. So this paper, we're going to find bear. Oh, I'm in bear. And these are the 3 that I had signed up for: soccer, Lego, and creaking. And then there, Jimmy's down in elephant. So we're going to find out. There's Jimmy, and he signed up for kayaking, Lego, and shooting. So all of the campers that were in elephant cabin would be listed here. with all of the programs that they are supposed to be in for their clubs. So that way they can keep track of their kids. So once all that's complete, they've handed out all their papers and they are done. That is all they have to do. And then they don't even have to look at this until next week when they want to go in and fill out new data. But at the same time, they do not want to have those same campers there for next week. They're going to have a new group of campers. And so that is why there is a menu button here called Archive. And when that archives, it takes all of those out, deletes it, and it puts it in the archive. And that was part of the thing that they wanted to have, is a place where they could go back and look at the different choices so they could see what kind of trends were happening and things like that. So that is why we have the option for archive there. Okay, so now that you can see how the program works from the perspective of the users, let's go to the backend and look at the code. Okay, so let's jump into the code. And the first thing I want to show you is how I populate the form using this data here. This button that I put in, oh, that's running right now, utilizes the script from main here. And Google's really interesting about how you can put code into these forms. You have to actually find the location of the questions in order to put in your code for that particular question. So I want to, set the form to say these certain things, but I have to find the location on the form. And so you go into your form and you actually, there's a couple ways to do this, but I personally like the way you just go in and inspect the form and you find it. It can be kind of time consuming at first, but once you get the hang of it, it's actually relatively easy to find. Look, there's my question. And so when I find my question, then what I'm looking for is the number that it is given right here, this data observe ID. And this number is what I have copied into my code to make sure that those selections get put into the right question. That's why it's really important for them to not manipulate the form, because if they add more questions, then it screws up the location of where these where this text ends up. So that's the idea of how to do the form, how to populate the form. I found an interesting feature with the dot map. It basically calls the provided function once for each element in an array. So it's just an interesting way to make sure that the selection that you are grabbing from a row or wherever it is you're grabbing goes to where it's supposed to in the order that you want it to. So the next thing I want to show you are the menu items, which is really just the entire code comes from that menu item that I put on the spreadsheet, this one here. Each of these are buttons that do different things. And so this code right here is what put those menu items onto the spreadsheet and just added that special menu there. And then it is named, this is the name of the menu items, and then these are the names of the functions, so it calls the functions. And each function is here. So there's a lot of loops in this because I am I'm comparing I'm looping through these options here and comparing it through the loop of going through all of the campers that have signed up. So it'll be interesting to see how it works with 150 campers, and I'm a little concerned about it being kind of slow, but I won't know that until I try it with a whole bunch of campers. So um, I think I've done it in a way that it won't be, but so there's a lot of loops in this. Here's the cabin loop. It's going to go through this here and compare it to the campers. And if it equals that, then it goes to this dock here. So, and basically all of the rest of them are pretty much repeated. Just comparing different things in the loops, adding headers. So like in this first loop, it's going to add the club header, and in this second loop, it's going to add the kid plus the cabin that they're in. So that's kind of the idea for that one. Anyways, a lot of that is just repeated, and then we get into the archive down here, which is a much simpler process. Basically, I'm just copying that information from the responses and putting it into that other spreadsheet and then deleting the rows out of responses. So that's a pretty simplistic code. I am not completely finished. I am in the process, and that's what this code is up here. This is my thinking code of trying to figure out how I'm going to sort through the choices. And I want to make sure that it is done well before camp starts. So I started into it and it started to get very complicated, and I didn't want to just throw something in just to turn the project in. I wanted to make sure it was done right before camp starts. So this part is still going to need to be worked on. Luckily, I have another month before camp starts, hopefully if no coronavirus gets in the way. So the whole concept of that sort is something I'm somewhat struggling with, just because I have to figure out a way to create a maximum amount of campers for each club. So I think what I'm thinking about at this point is adding a couple cells here of putting something that the leadership staff can put in here, like a maximum amount for kayaking would be 10, and they could put that number in here. And then on the next cell, it would be actual amount, and it would update what's actually happening. And so if I am going through and kids are signing up and there are 10 people or 10 kids that go in and sign up for kayaking, well, then that next, if that's the max, then those 10 kids that chose kayaking as a first choice will then need to be put into the club that is their second choice. And so I am still in the process of working through that code of how that is going to look. So right now, it basically just puts the kids automatically in their first choice. There's no maximum attendance amount. So we're just going to say, if 150 kids sign up for boating, at this point, the code is 150 kids are going into boating. So that is just an element that I still need to get figured out before camp starts. So that is the basics of my code right there. And like I said, this all could have been right here. This all could have been one item and one function. All of this could have been put together into one big function. But like I said, I wanted to have it separated so that they had the option to print off those different things for when they needed it. So that is where I am at for the code. Okay, so now that we've gone through all of that, let's see where I am in the program. The original goals of the program was to decrease the time it took for campers to sign up for their activities. which after showing the program to my husband, he was really excited about it, and he said, in his words, it's going to be a game changer. So I think for sign up, I definitely have given them opportunity to decrease the time in that. Create a process that's easier for leaders. I feel like personally, anytime you get away from paper and pencil and you can go into the computer and do a program, that's going to be a much easier process, and something they can easily change those programs without having to print off a bunch of sheets and like, oh no, we don't want to do those programs, we got to switch this out, and then I got to reprint off a whole bunch of sheets. This time it's just go in, change it, and it's done. Decrease the time and stress involved in sorting the campers into their activities. This is something that I have partly done, but not completely done. I still need to work through the rest of that sorting process to set that maximum limit of campers and how that's going to look in the sorting process. But in general, that part of it is taken care of. Give the leaders the ability to print lists in specific clubs and cabins. Once again, Google doesn't really have a print server that I can just hit print and it automatically goes to the printer, but it does have the option to go to those docs and then they can print those docs. They can also, manipulate those docs if they want to. They can add more information to it, but it's already in a document that they can print however they want. Develop a way to archive the responses each week in order to track trends. Google Forms already tracks responses and has graphs and things like that on the other side of their form, but I've also set up that archive so that way they can go in and see, okay, for the summer of 2020, nobody really signed up for the fossil pit, so we probably shouldn't be offering that as an activity anymore. So that's something they can go back and look at. So what still needs to be completed and cleaned up? Just in general, when I'm done, I need to go in and just kind of clean up little things, but I definitely need to get through that sorting through the choices based on the max camper size. That's a really important one that needs to get taken care of here pretty soon. And then like I said before, clean up the script that's a little fast, so it's a little faster. I don't have a big target audience right now. I can only do 10 or less based on the coronavirus. So until I can get a whole bunch of people, or I can just manually go in and do 150, but I kind of like the idea of having a larger market to look at it, try it out, put in a whole bunch of responses and see if it runs a little slower with having all those responses in it, or if it still runs okay. I think if it runs slow, then I may need to look into cleaning up the loop a little bit. Research options for blocking changes to the form. That's probably one of the biggest things in this whole build that I made that is a little disconcerting. Is like, oh man, I hope they don't go in and mess up that form. And I've had that experience with my school district job as well. I've built several programs and then I just share them. I send them out to the group of people that wanted to use them. And that, they ask me, hey, will you build this program? Sure, I'm going to send it out to you. Don't mess with it. So I get nervous that people are going to go in and mess up the form and, mess up the location of where things go and things like that. So that's, I guess, maybe a downside to using Google and all of its apps and things like that. But at this point, I think it'll work for what we're doing. Research that print ability. I, at this point, don't know if there's a way that I can just have that button go straight to printer, but it's something worth researching. And once again, to test on a larger audience. So once we're able to have more than 10 people together in a room, then I will test that out. Okay, so what did I discover in creating this program? A couple of things that I kind of took to note for myself was creating a workflow. I think it's something that I did along the way, but it's something I also need to perfect. I need to get better at creating that workflow of what needs to come first, how I would do wireframes or things like that for a website. How do I need to create a workflow for creating a program? I think that would have helped how I went along in the process. And within that, to take baby steps. I can very easily say, oh, I really want it to do this. And I get caught up in that end product, and I need to go back and find those little tiny baby steps to get there. So I know I also need to work on saving after each time I try the program. So let's say I create some code, I'm going to run it. And before I run it, I need to save it. And then I can run it. And then luckily with Apps Script, with Google Apps Script, it automatically saves. It has a history of everything that you do. But I think in some ways I need to like save a giant portion of my code that's working. So that way when I go in and I screw it all up, I can go back to that giant portion that's working again. So I definitely need to create a way that I am saving the content that is good or working well, the code that's working well, and then before I go in and add and take away and things like that. So I can sometimes get mixed up in all of it. I need to work on writing detailed and clear comments in the code. A lot of times I don't do that along the way. I do it when I'm already confused. So I get lost in my code and I think, oh, I wish I would have written really clear documentation here, and I should have done it along the way. So that's something that I am working on getting better at. Um, as it relates to this whole Google form and the JavaScript and just this whole open source process, and I know there are definitely more open source ways to build applications, but as far as Google is concerned, it doesn't, just because it's open source doesn't mean you can do whatever you want. There's still always going to be limitations. So sometimes it can be frustrating when I really want it to do something and I can't get it to do it, and it's really not in the code. It's just not the ability of that program. So one thing I also learned along the way and I'm getting better at is to walk away every now and then. It's just like building any other puzzle. Sometimes you just have to step away from it so you can see it a little clearly. And then probably one of the biggest takeaways I have from this whole process is that a team is really helpful. When I got into computer science, the whole idea was for me to find a job working from home. And I really enjoy programming, but doing it on your own as an individual can be very challenging. Sometimes sometimes it helps, and oftentimes it helps to have a team of people kind of throw ideas out and say, hey, what about trying it this way? Or why don't you try this loop? Or why don't you, I've used this in code before and it worked really well for me. So doing it on my own does make it more challenging. When I work in the school district and I'm not having to stay home because of the coronavirus and we're all just kind of isolating ourselves, when I could build programs within the office with other people around was a lot easier and more helpful, more encouraging. There's just a lot more ideas that are thrown out there. So being in a team is helpful. It's not a must. You can do it without, but it is helpful. So there's a lot that I took away from this program, and a lot that I learned along the way, and a lot that I will probably continue to learn as I build upon it and other programs. So that is my project presentation and my program. I hope you enjoyed it and have a great summer.